The silence before the bell. There is a specific kind of silence that exists right before a school bell rings. It isn't peaceful. It isn't calm. It's loaded. It hums in the walls, lingers in the air, presses into your chest. It's the silence of 1,000 unfinished thoughts, half-written assignments and futures people assume are still wide open. Evan Miller stood in that silence. He was 17 years old, standing in the main hallway of Ridgeway High School, staring at the scuffed gray floor as if the answers might rise out of it. Students rushed past him, laughing, arguing, checking phones, already moving on with their day. No one noticed he wasn't moving. The bell rang. Sharp final. And instead of turning toward his classroom like he had every other day of his life, Evan turned around and walked the other way. That moment, small, quiet, unannounced, was the closest he ever came to giving up. Evan wasn't the student people worried about. He wasn't disruptive. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't failing on purpose. He was the kind of kid teachers described with words like bright, capable, promising. Those words followed him from elementary school, all the way into high school like a shadow that grew heavier every year. Bright meant expectations. Capable meant no excuses. Promising meant you haven't delivered yet. When Evan was younger, school felt safe, predictable. You studied, you tested, you earned points. Life outside the classroom was messier, but inside things made sense. That changed slowly. So slowly no one noticed. Evan lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with his mother on the edge of town. The building was old, the paint peeling in places where rainwater had found its way in over the years. His mother, Denise Miller, worked nights at a long-term care facility. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16, sometimes back-to-back. She loved her job, but it drained her. By the time Evan woke up for school, she was usually asleep. By the time she woke up, he was already heading to work. They passed each other like ghosts in the same hallway. Money was always tight, not in a dramatic way, no eviction notices taped to the door, but in a constant, low-level tension that never left the room. Bills on the counter. Coupons clipped carefully. Conversations cut short. Evan learned early not to ask for much. The first missed assignment didn't seem important. Then another. Then a quiz he forgot to study for because he'd worked a double shift at the grocery store after school. He told himself he'd catch up. He always did, until he didn't. Late nights became normal, sleep became optional, coffee became dinner. Teachers started saying things like, "You need to apply yourself. You're better than this. I expected more from you." Each comment landed heavier than the last. Because Evan expected more from himself too. By junior year, Evan felt like he was constantly running, but never getting closer. College applications loomed. Guidance counselors talked about GPAs and scholarships like they were simple math problems. Friends compared acceptance letters and test scores. No one talked about exhaustion. No one talked about fear. No one talked about what it feels like to be drowning quietly, while everyone assumes you're swimming just fine. Evan stopped raising his hand in class. Stopped checking his grades online. Stopped believing that effort automatically led to results. The morning Evan walked out of school, he was already late. Again. His phone buzzed with a notification, another automated warning about attendance, another reminder that systems don't care why you're struggling. Standing in the hallway, Evan felt something unfamiliar. Not panic. Resignation. The idea hit him fully formed. What if I just stopped trying? Not forever. Not dramatically. Just stop pushing so hard. The thought felt like relief. And that scared him more than anything else ever had. Evan didn't go home. He walked. past the football field, past the parking lot, past the bus stop he'd used for years. His feet carried him without direction until he ended up in front of the town's public library, an old brick building wedged between a closed movie theater and a laundromat. He went inside without thinking. The library was quiet but not empty. Evan sat at a table near the window, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. That's when a voice broke the silence. "You don't look like someone who skipped school to have fun." He looked up. The woman standing there wasn't a teacher, or an administrator, or anyone he recognized. She looked normal. "Are you okay?" she asked. Evan opened his mouth to say yes. Instead, he said the truth. "I don't think I can do this anymore." Her name was Maria Alvarez. She didn't rush him, didn't lecture, didn't panic. She listened. Evan told her everything: the pressure, the exhaustion, the feeling of falling behind without knowing how to stop. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You're not broken," she said. "You're overloaded." No one had ever framed it that way before. Maria helped Evan make a plan. Not a 5-year plan. Not a dream plan. A survival plan. One meeting with a counselor. One conversation with his school. One honest talk with his mom. Small steps. Real ones. Telling his mother was the hardest part. Evan expected disappointment. Instead, she cried. Not because he was failing, but because she hadn't known how much he was carrying. They sat at the kitchen table that night longer than they had in years. For the first time, they faced the problem together. Things didn't magically improve. Evan still struggled, still failed quizzes, still felt overwhelmed. But now he had support. Accommodations at school. Adjusted work hours. Someone to talk to before things spiraled. It wasn't perfect. It was possible. 3 months later, Evan bombed a major exam. The old voice came back instantly. "See, you can't fix this." He sat alone in his car, hands shaking, closer to quitting than he'd been in months. Instead of disappearing, he reached out. That choice changed everything. Resilience didn't mean never failing. It meant staying. Staying when it hurt. Staying when it was uncomfortable. Staying when quitting felt easier. Evan retook the exam. He passed. Not perfectly, but enough. Graduation wasn't dramatic. Just folding chairs and sunburns and names read from a list. But when Evan crossed the stage, something inside him settled. He hadn't won. He hadn't conquered. He had endured. Years later, Evan would tell students this story. Not as inspiration. As truth. Because most people don't quit loudly. They quit quietly. And sometimes not quitting, just once, is enough to change the direction of a life. If you're watching this and you feel behind. If you're tired of being the capable one. If you've thought about giving up, not because you don't care, but because you care too much. This story is for you. You don't need to be stronger. You need support. And choosing not to quit today can change everything. For more honest stories about unseen struggles and the choice to keep going, subscribe to the channel and support the work by liking and sharing.